What's up, guys? It's Evan, and we're back with another episode of the Super Secret Filmcast. Chris isn't with us today, but we're talking to Dan and Dana from Gnarly Bay, which is an awesome production company located in Westerly, Rhode Island. So not too far from me. I've really admired their work for a long time. They do some incredible stuff. Their new demo reel is so good. You need to go to their website, go to their Vimeo, just watch some of their stuff. They make really good work, and I'm excited for you to hear our conversation as we talk about sort of navigating a career in production, picking which projects you do, passion projects, and finding brands that align with the kind of work you want to make. It's a really good conversation, and it was so good that we kept going way past our time limit, and we had to split it into two parts. So you're going to get the second part of this one very soon. Part one's coming out today. Before we get into that, I have some exciting news in that I have two messages from sponsors for you guys. That's right, we got sponsors. We're going to keep this quick, but they're two brands that I've been using, really love what they're doing, and think you guys might be interested to know more about them. The first one is Core Group. If you follow me on Instagram or YouTube, you may have seen the recent video where I talked about some of the troubles that I've had with taxes. It's been a constant thorn in my side, waiting till the end of the year, trying to keep track of expenses and receipts, and then owing the IRS a whole bunch of money that I didn't expect. That can be a big pain in the butt, and I've seen people get buried under payment plans and just the stress of it all. I finally decided I had to do something about it and moved off of QuickBooks Online, which I was horrible at managing myself anyway, and over to Core Group. Core has made everything simpler for me. They have answered all my questions about expenses, write-offs, and switching from a sole proprietor over to forming an LLC, making an S-Corp election, and this may be too technical for you, and that's fine. They help you with that, but I'm saving thousands of dollars on my taxes already. If that's something that's interesting to you, you can click the link in the description of this episode to go schedule a discovery call and get more information with Core Group. They're fantastic. You're not going to regret it. Again, click the link in the description to go check out Core Group. They're accountants and bookkeepers who can help you finally get rid of all the stress you can deal with taxes and bookkeeping. Our second sponsor today is Assemble. You may have heard of Assemble. They've been running some campaigns online, and Assemble is a very cool new software platform. It actually comes up in our conversation with Dan and Dana as a tool that they've been using. It's something I've been using, and the best way I could explain it is if Google Docs and your calendar and Frame.io and everything all had a baby with like a CRM, and they have basically made a production software which allows you to manage projects, clients, deadlines, which stages of a project you're at, any pre-production assets, plans for casting and locations. And it's really something that small productions can actually use to help keep everything really organized. I had looked into some other products like Monday and Copper and Studio Binder before, and nothing really felt like a good fit for the kind of work I was doing, and Assemble is a tool that finally helps. If you're interested in checking out Assemble, you can go to assemble.tv or click the link below. We have a discount code for our listeners, which gives you your first month free, no strings attached. You can go check it out, see if you like it. If it's helpful, you can get a membership, and if it's not, didn't cost you anything. To get that first month free with Assemble, your discount code is SSFC, Super Secret Filmcast, as an acronym. So again, that's assemble.tv or the link below. Use coupon code SSFC, Super Secret Filmcast. That's it. Those are our sponsor messages today. We're going to get right into our conversation with Dan and Dana, and I will see you guys again next week.
We try to bring in projects as best as possible, or side projects that can kind of feed everybody in a creative and fun and energetic way. Because at the end of the day, this is our career, and it's like 80% of our time, and all of our team's time is put towards this. We want to make sure it's as enjoyable as possible. And I think behind the scenes, Dan and I carry that the burden of trying to make that happen in our heads, with the sleepless nights and all that. But we continue to do that to ourselves just to try to create an environment and a company that's as enjoyable as possible. That's the goal, at least.
Yeah. So how do you guys, like, with where you're at now, how do you think about goals? Because I feel like people have big goals, little goals. They have desired end states. Some of that's narrative features, some of that's national broadcast stuff, some of that's a certain team size, some of that's revenue. Like, how do you guys look at like where you want to be and if you're where you should be at any given point?
That's a good question. I mean, we try every year to at the end of the year to kind of set up a list of team goals, like company goals that are short term and long term that constantly are getting reset and updated every year. And I believe this last year, our goal, I could probably bring them up, but one of our goals was to kind of get involved in the community more and to have more community involvement. Another goal was to kind of steer the ship more towards series development, trying to do, whether that be feature documentary or documentary series that can kind of land on Netflix or Hulu. And then on top of that, we just wanted, the biggest goal that we set out was to just slightly steer the ship again and just do more meaningful, impactful work. And that was kind of like a North Star that we put at the beginning of this year, just trying to kind of put our powers to use, where we feel like we can tell stories and we feel like we can strike emotion and maybe hopefully inspire people to move and act in a certain way. And so we definitely put that North Star up there company-wide. Like, we're looking for stories, we're looking for people and interesting projects that we can bring to life that help make that happen. And just basically either put a positive message out into the world or help shed light on, a part of the world that maybe people aren't too aware of and need some light shed on. That's in a nutshell. I don't know if you want to add to that, Dan, but.
Yeah, as far as goals, and we actually wrote them down for the first time ever, like actually in a PDF and made a mission statement document, because we had gotten asked that question over the years from people who, collaborators and people who work here and people who might want to work here, like basically what's your 5-year, 10-year sort of goal. And I think we were always kind of operating like, like maybe 2 weeks out, instead of thinking five years out. And so for the first time, we kind of put that into a document, which I think was like a great exercise, because it did make us like question ourselves what we really actually want to do and where we want to go. So that was a good exercise. I don't know, it would probably evolve weekly, but I think we have a pretty firm grasp on it,
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
At least we've broadcasted that we have a firm grasp on it, which I think is also
important. Well, that was something
for the whole team.
I think the reason
kind
it took
of be
us
like, oh, these guys actually kind of know what they're doing, and I think that it's important for us to feel like we know what we're doing now, so that the whole team can kind of feel like they're on a good ride.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason that we finally wrote it down, I mean, because Dan and I kind of building this company and trying to, figuring everything out along the way, we always had everything kind of like this innate understanding of where we were, the health of the company, what we were working on. It was always like locked up in our heads, and we'd have these long conversations trying to like hash out plans and strategy and maneuvers. And we realized that as our team grew, we weren't properly communicating that to the rest of the team. So come out really defining what our mission statement is, our company goals and all that for the first time was pretty refreshing, actually, and I think pretty helpful.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like I've been playing with, and it sounds like some of where you guys are is like, I feel like throughout my career, I've had these like sort of momentary goals of like things I wanted to accomplish. And I ran into this situation where like I kept checking those off and then just sort of getting frustrated almost, that it was like, okay, you sort of hit the mountaintop and then there's always another mountaintop. And I feel like one of the things that I've been thinking through lately is like defining success as like a state to be in instead of like a momentary achievement, that's like, there's this bandwidth of almost like thriving, and that, has to do with who I'm working for, the kind of work I'm doing, how my personal life is going, like my health, my mental health, and that if all those things are together in a way that's relatively balanced, that is success more than like 1 million views on YouTube or, whatever else, getting a staff pick or some of the funny things that earlier on were part of the goal list. And that's where like, I think that like doing meaningful work is such a cool goal compared to like doing, I don't know, getting to use a techno crane. Like, not that there's anything wrong with those sorts of goals, but I think a lot of us, at least for myself, like those have been goals at various points, and they're just very shallow for me once you get them. It's like, oh, well, that was fun for 5 seconds. And when I look back at things that have been like meaningful projects, it's like that stuff lasts so much longer and is so much more satisfying, which is one of the things that's like, part of the reason that I wanted to talk to you guys is like, you have this skill for making stuff that I think is just really meaningful and puts being meaningful above a lot of the flash that I think comes with our industry. And so like a small example of that to me is Rambo Day. I've watched Rambo Day so many times, and I show it to people all the time, and I cry every time. I cannot watch that video without crying. And it's like, as a DP, it's not a cinematography reel type piece, but just as something meaningful, it's so good. And so like, I'm curious for you guys, like in your journey, like how do you navigate that, in a world where everyone's trying to put out bigger budgets, more, here's our production infrastructure, here's our team. I feel like you guys have it feels like you've prioritized meaningful work over a lot of that stuff and over big client lists in logos and all that sort of things. Like, how do you guys think about meaningful work and what you put out? And that piece is the kind of thing that could have just been something for friends and you guys, right? Like, it didn't have to be a Gnarly Bay thing, but you put it out under your business. And how do you think about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I think that in general, that video has led to so many things. And, when you do something like that, you're not aiming for it to lead to new work or new clients or anything like that. It was just kind of something, it was like a seed of an idea that just sort of kept sprouting and sort of got bigger and bigger, and we got more friends involved, and like it just became bigger and bigger until I think it was pretty late in the process that we were like, oh, we definitely got to film this. So then pulling in the resources that we're lucky enough to have, meaning like, the people that work here to come and spend a day running around in the woods with us and our friends to capture it, and then spend weeks, if not months, of company time to cut it. You do kind of look back and you're like, well, it is primarily the audience is our friends, but at the same time, putting something out there that's just generally positive and has this like kind of like amazing ode to friendship is a valuable thing. And then it also, from like a client perspective, somehow has allowed like just good, it's like a good conversation starter. It's like, oh, I saw that video, and like it shows that we at least like what we do, and we're passionate about capturing things and presenting them in a cool way. So I think it's like hard to quantify the value of something like that. I don't even know what the dollar amount was associated with that whole extravaganza, but it probably wasn't small. And and I think that that's the way historically we've approached it, where it's just like, we just want to make something good, and we might rob Peter to pay Paul sort of thing. Like, we might use some of our commercial budgets to sort of trickle into these other little projects. And it's always kind of paid dividends in some weird way. And we don't even exactly know how to quantify that. And I don't even know if it makes sense to try to quantify, it's just something that innately we feel like is important,
Yeah, I think from a purely from a client perspective or a potential client perspective, the best thing something like that does is it attracts like-minded individuals. So a producer may see it, or a creative director from some sort of agency, and they may have a client that has nothing to do with what that film was, but it's still, they see that it stirs something inside them, and they're just like, man, I just want to work with these guys, just purely on a vibe level. I think I'd get along with them and their crew, and they seem like they have fun. So I think putting that out there is a really good way to we always say steer the ship.
Right.
It's like to move the Titanic. It's tiny little adjustments, and we're always thinking like, is whatever we put out, is it going to kind of steer us in a little slightly different direction to work that we just a little bit more enjoyable.
Right.
And then from my perspective, those types of videos, like, for me, it may not be the smartest thing from a financial perspective or a business perspective, but it is really cool when you can put your time that, we're dedicating endless amounts of time, our personal lives to this career. And it's so cool when that time is partially dedicated to create something that's kind of special, where you can look back years down the road and still get something from it. And, and that's just really cool, because I even watched The Important Places. I actually watched it yesterday. And, at that time when we made that film, when we were working with Forrest, like I wasn't a father yet. And I understood the importance of the relationship between Forrest and his dad and getting old. And now watching that film, now I have 2 kids, and it took on this whole different meaning, and it was like hard to watch it and not get choked up. And it's really cool to be able to create something like that where you can almost inspire your future self. And that's that's kind of the ultimate. If we can continue to figure out a way to keep doing that here and there without driving our company into the ground, then I'm all for it.
Right. Well, that's something that I feel like the like sort of branding, marketing, like it's something I've been talking to friends about a lot, is this idea that's like you want to put things out that are sort of self-selecting, right? That it's like the people who are into it will be into it, and the people who aren't into it will be not into it. And I feel like for a lot of people I've talked to, at least, and I've struggled with this, but there's this fear that like there could be a fear that's like, oh, if we put this out and whoever, Coca-Cola comes and sees it, they're going to think we're a bunch of goobers and that we're not a serious production company. And like, do you guys deal with those fears with any of these sorts of projects of like, oh, this isn't the most polished produced thing we've done and people are going to have some sort of thought about it?
I think Rambo Day in particular, and, we've done a sequel since called Rosso Day, which is just as ridiculous, if not more. I think it's such niche content, so there really isn't much strategy there for sure. And it's slightly vulgar and slightly, all these various things that might rub people the wrong way. But I think we stand by the basic sentiment of it, that it's putting positivity out there in the world. And, I think that is like maybe some sort of like a metric for the kind of work we want to put out there. Is just like, does this video make you feel something and make you feel better at the end of it, kind of thing, and even though there's plenty of goober moments and things that are certainly not cinematography masterpieces, it just gives a general sense of like priorities and also just maybe logistically, like maybe Rambo Day, if anything, and Rosso Day show that we logistically can pull things off.
That's true.
So, there's some wild producing challenge that those videos came with too. So there's some elements there, and editing, and there's different things that kind of shine throughout those videos. So we I think we stand by them just from a purely like creative and joy perspective.
Right.
We can be serious in other films, but like that was our time to just like have fun. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
It's cool too.
That makes a lot of sense.
I was going to say it's cool too, because those 2 films in particular are kind of interesting, because they, just looking back on them, if they put any form of inspiration out into the world, I feel like, especially Rambo Day, what it did was it inspired people to kind of create their own experience. And that's really what that was. It was a completely memorable experience for everybody involved. I mean, especially myself. But that's just a beautiful thing. I think we need more social experiences with our friends and family and especially at this day and age. So just getting out there and getting dirty and being an idiot, I think, is pretty beneficial nowadays.
Right. Well, and that makes sense. And I think there's something to that, like, especially if you're defining success as like doing meaningful work, then I feel like that's helpful to then look at something like that and be like, okay, our goal isn't just like make Super Bowl commercials. It's to make meaningful things. And this maybe isn't a Super Bowl commercial, but it's a meaningful thing. And so it's a piece of that puzzle, right? And I think that's something that, like, you know, I think we were briefly talking about this already, but it's something that, like, I've struggled with sometimes, is this feeling of, like, the stuff that I'm interested in and the stuff that I care about and the stuff that I think would be really fun to make versus sort of what you may think the industry or the community wants to see you doing, you know? And I struggle with that with this even, honestly, that I'm like, by doing this, am I putting myself in a bucket for people that's like, you're another, you know, Philip Bloom, whoever else, like YouTuber kind of guy. And it's like, that's not how I see myself and what I want to do. This is something that I like to do. And I don't know, I still wrestle with it, but I think for the most part, I've come down to, like, if success for me is like getting to make a living, making things that I really like and getting to talk to people who I think are interesting and like all the levels for that, and this is a piece of that, I really enjoy these conversations. And if some people are going to be like, you're not a real filmmaker, it's like, well, fuck you guys then, you know, like, I don't know. It's just, I can't hold on to that too much. And I think that's part of that thing that I've respected about you guys is it seems like you're just sort of forging your own path and not feeling like you have to hold up all the little trophies along the way that most people do to, like, validate that they're successful, you know? So I'd be curious. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just on that point, like, I think the thing we admire about you from afar is that, like, it seems like you do, like, you know, you started a community, you got this podcast going, like, you're just, you know, you just make it happen. And I think that like all these passion projects that we do, there's 10 or 15 or 20 more that we've convinced ourselves aren't good enough to do, you know? So anything that makes it through that, like, kind of like filter of self-doubt or whatever is like trophy enough to, like, hold up to the world and be like, hey, we did this, you know, like we convinced ourselves that it was a good enough idea. Like, the fact that you convinced yourself that it was a good enough idea to make a podcast, and you're doing it, and, you know, that you uphold this community, and you know, all that sort of, it's important stuff that you wake up each day and make things, you know? So I think,
and not only that, I would add to that too and say, like, this, what you're doing and what you're building here is meaningful work. Because it's actually insanely helpful to people. Because these career paths that anybody that's going to listen to this podcast is trying to follow, it's hard. It's super hard to become a DP or start a production company or anything in this world is really hard. And I think people listen to conversations like this because it's almost like therapy. It's comforting to hear other people's struggles and challenges and other people's outlooks on their own career path. So this is insanely meaningful work as far as I'm concerned. So I give you a lot of credit for that.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So I'd be curious, I guess, because again, like, it's just, I feel like I see little pop-ups from you guys over the last, like, the whole time I've been doing this, because I've been doing this for 10 years. How long have you guys been? Because I feel like my first awareness of you is when I was doing Lens Pro to-go stuff way back in the day, and you guys were sort of also associated with them, but you were established by then, it at least seemed like. So how long has Gnarly Bay existed?
Dan, you got that.
Since
Dan's
1812. Go for that one. He's got a good answer. What's that?
Established. I don't know. I mean, what are we saying? It's
Don't
hard
get
to.
us in
It's
trouble
hard
with the
because-
IRS.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. We've been established. No, I mean, we established. It's like, I don't know. I mean, because Dan and I were doing this right out of high school, so we started just. It was, we were doing whatever we could to get our hands on making some sort of film or anything to do to kind of either get equipment or just kind of get things started. So that was a long time ago, but I would think, I mean, I guess maybe when we first started, when we had our first employee, maybe when was that, Dan?
We made it official. Evan, we're not supposed to be recording this, are we?
Yeah, why not?
No,
really that secret?
No. Meaning like literally, are we supposed to have pressed record on these cameras?
Oh no, you're good.
Okay.
No, you guys are good. We're good.
I just suddenly was like, damn it. Should we have press record?
No, we're good.
Okay, cool.
So, first employee was 2009. I mean, we had some pretty good clients by then. So, I mean, the first time we actually walked into an agency and we're like, I mean, so there's different tiers of work. Obviously, like, weddings, that was definitely a tier of work that worked for, 4 or 5 years and got us to get equipment and all that sort of stuff. And then there was a couple agencies, like Connecticut agencies, that allowed us to work with bigger brands. And then we were able to put a couple logos like Chic and
Right.
Royal Caribbean, and like, that's important stuff to like get your first paid gig that actually is with like a real company. Like, that's not like a local shoe store, which was another video that we're locally famous for, is making one of the most worst regional TV commercials of all time. Or was it the best? We don't know.
It might have been the best. It's hard to say.
Memorable.
Yeah, memorable.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, like as soon as you get a couple logos on, then you can make a reel that has a couple logos, and then you can maybe start shopping some different agencies. And so
Right.
I feel like that was like around 2009, which kind of collided with DSLRs.
Right.
Maybe 2007. Like we were shooting some client work with lens adapters and that sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
Sure.
So how old are you guys?
So
I'm
we
40.
are closing in on 40. I'm 39.
Okay, cool. Cool.
Yeah, and Dana
Which
just
is
turned
crazy.
40. So, so we so as far as like our first meeting at an agency to like come in with a reel, maybe 2009, and like even understanding that a reel was a thing. Like I think one of our first agency meetings was like we rolled in with like a 10-minute video, and like they lowered the lights and had a presentation, and we watched like a 10 to 12 minute therapeutic horse riding video when they were trying to hire us to do like videos for like higher education. So like, we didn't have any sophisticated sort of sales strategy for a very, very long time, maybe up until this week. So yeah, I think it's been always an evolving into like a real company. But then, yeah, like Dana says, 2010 was first employee.
Gotcha.
And then things became real.
And so what's
Slowly, slowly, everything's been very slow. I think if we were to, like, I listened to something with Mr. Beast the other day, and he was talking about how his journey's been like 7 years, and he thinks he could tell somebody how to do it in like a year, the same thing in a year. And I feel like, our journey has been 20 years now. And like, I feel like with the internet and the way things are, that I feel like we could have collapsed that into like 5 years, maybe, I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
I struggle with that though. Like, sorry, you go ahead, Dana.
Well,
and specifically because we spent the first 10, 15 years like pretty insulated in Rhode Island, and not really reaching out too much, because we felt like we almost like had a little secret and we didn't want to tell anybody about it,
Yeah.
And it was like,
well, not only that, we were young too.
Yeah.
We were young, and we were trying to, in the beginning, especially during the wedding time, is like we would make some money and then just disappear and go travel, and then we'd get an agency gig, and then we'd go travel, and so we were like bouncing around like vagabonds. We weren't trying to. We were just trying to do whatever we could that was fun at the time. So it took a while. I think probably the first employee, we were like, okay, let's actually try to do this thing,
But I feel like that stuff, I don't know. I guess I'd be curious your perspective, because from my perspective, again, just looking at from the outside of you guys, it's like I feel like that life experience is all like a valuable puzzle piece that builds into like future opportunities and all this other stuff. And that like if you didn't have the reputation almost of being these like globe-trotting dudes from Rhode Island, I don't know that, it's one of those like if you tried to take that piece out and just compress the puzzle, I think it would have played out totally differently, which doesn't necessarily mean worse, like that you had to do that. But I don't know. I guess I feel like in some ways, like there are chunks of my career that I look back at and I'm like, you could just pull that 3 years out that felt like I wasn't doing anything. But there was like integral stuff in even the rest of life that was going on before work could really move to another level. And that's something that like, I don't know. When I look at like what you guys have done, I think that building what you have out of what you have and the time frame you have is very cool, and that, you know, everyone wants to go from buying an A7S to working for Nike in 5 years, and I just don't think that's how it works, you know. And that's at least that's what I tell myself. Maybe I'm too loose with myself on that, but I think you know, it takes time to build all the, especially with how mysterious this whole thing is, you know, like for as little information, it's not like building an e-com brand. Like it's a lot of just trial by fire, I feel like, to figure out the logistics and the creative and the how you meet with people and how you're positioning yourselves. And I don't know, I feel like you guys have done a pretty good job in the time frame you've had.
Yeah, I think you convinced me at least to definitely reconsider that thought of collapsing into like 20 years into 5 years, because, you know, I feel like you know, you're almost like not prepared to learn lessons until you've made a certain amount of mistakes. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Like, you know, yeah, you know,
well, even just
you're almost like not ready to, you're not ready to learn certain things until you've like been through the gauntlet enough, you know?
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. I think if we collapsed into 5 years, we probably would have crashed and burned, or at least I probably would have mentally.
I mean, that's the thing that I look at. Like, one of my first connections that I got, like literally a few months after getting a camera, was the VP of marketing for Dunkin' Donuts. And I was like all excited that I had a connection to Dunkin' Donuts. And he was really nice, but of course it never went anywhere. But in hindsight, I'm like, dude, if I got anything with Dunkin' Donuts, it would have been a nightmare. Like, I would have blown that so hard. And, you know, you just needed a lot of those little failures to get to where you could even swing that at all, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah, we talk about one job in particular is a Nikon job that we did in 2010, where we got hired by McCann Erickson, and we were just way in over our heads, you know, like we almost like chart our career as like before Nikon and after Nikon, because it was like literally production Olympics. There was babies, there was dogs, it was 4 days. It was a prototype camera. We had to shoot on Nikon. It was like, there was just so many crazy things about it that almost like broke us over the course of that 4 or 5 days. And it was like this big moment of like, if we're going to do this, we either got to figure it out or we can't be doing this, because it will literally like destroy us, you know, because and I think that it took like the next 10 years to figure out what the mistakes were that we made in that one shoot, you know? So it definitely was trial by fire, but it also was like, oh, you've made it to a certain place where you're doing commercial work for a New York agency, but you have a lot to learn, you know? And
yeah.
we spent the next 10 years kind of refining processes, you know, and just understanding how important processes are, which, you know, might be getting tedious for people around here, of us like reinventing and, you know, kind of like fine tuning and sharpening, sanding the edges of kind of some of our processes, you know, but like, I feel like we're starting to get somewhere, you know, we're starting to figure it out, you know?
Well, I feel like I'd be interested to hear more of like what that looks like for you guys, because that's something that I've been talking to a lot of people lately about, across like all tiers of, or all roles within the industry, of this idea that's like, to get over this hump at a certain point, a lot of it comes down to process and preparation. And that like, I think, I'll just speak for myself again, like you get so good at winging it, and then you get good at like building little bits of support that feel like process and preparation around what's a lot of gut feeling and winging it. And then it's like, but eventually you sort of need to make this more codified, like, and especially as you have a team, because it can't all just be in your guys' heads, you know? So like, what could you share a little bit about, like, what are some of the first processes maybe, and then like what have been some of the, how does that look like for you guys now? Like, because it's not just, hey, we have a bunch of money and we want you to make a video, and then you show up and make a video and it's done, you know? Like there's steps that go into that, and could you guys talk about that a little?
Oh yeah, we could probably talk about that for like 3 days straight.
Hey, perfect.
But yeah, we're kind of obsessed with all of our processes that we've put in place, and we've created like 50 different docs for all sorts of different situations. And but basically our processes, we use I mean, Dan, I don't know if you want to dive through like, where do you even begin with our process that we put in place?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think that like generally, because I don't know how deep in the weeds you want to get as far as
Yeah,
like specific things, you know.
It can get pretty nerdy pretty quick, so I don't know if we want to go all the way into it.
Yeah,
I always
think
feel like the nerdy stuff is more interesting. Like, I feel like most people probably know the basic stuff. So maybe not that we have to go into every layer of the onion, but like, what's some of the stuff that you guys would consider like nerdy granular processes? Because I think that's probably the stuff that people don't even think that people do, you know?
Well, I think that was kind of one of the things where it's just like, I think that collapsing the journey, like, I don't think it should have taken us like 20 years to create like a solid Google Doc for scheduling or a solid Google Doc for pre-pro books or like those sort of things. And I think that that's where I'm saying that, like, I think some of the journey can get collapsed where I saw recently on some YouTube video, I think it was the guy from, was it his name? Jack Conte, maybe? He's the dude who from, is he
the guy from Patreon?
Patreon, yes, Patreon. So he's a pretty, he'd make some pretty cool videos, and I think he was talking about the Legoization of the world and how like all these building blocks that people have to build on, and I guess like we've been building this Lego block of like production documents for like the past 5 years, and different checklist apps and this, that, and the other thing, all this productivity stuff that you can watch a million different videos on YouTube about. And I think the oddest thing is that like, there's not like one specifically for production, because it's such a complicated, like, it's just such a complicated conundrum. And, Google Docs is amazing, and Asana or ClickUp or Monday or all these different things. We've gone through all the different things, but there's not one thing that like, kind of locks in the process. And this isn't a plug whatsoever, but we've been taking all of the knowledge that we have, and we've been kind of collaborating behind the scenes with a company called Assemble. And
dude, I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, they're finally building the thing, and it's
so
not
I've been
ready
using
yet.
Assemble.
Yeah,
it's awesome. Yeah, it's very cool. And I've been talking to Nate. We're actually, this is now that we're accidentally into Plug World, if anyone listening to this uses code SSFC, Super Secret Filmcast, as an acronym, they get a month free on Assemble if they want to go check it out. So I've been using it. It's super cool. It's like Studio Binder and Frame.io and everything all had a baby that actually works for the kind of production that at least I do, and probably that you guys do too, because I've played with so many of these tools and never found any of them that integrated well. And that it's so interesting that you guys are involved, because I was like, someone finally made something that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it can get better and better. We actually, we've used it a little bit, but we're trying to get a couple more features before we can really, really dive in. But basically the thing right now is that everything is so scattered between Google Docs, Google Calendars, ClickUp. We use ClickUp a lot, and that's like a super nerdy tool, but it's like basically all the milestones of the process and the edit. And it took us a year and a half to like build something that actually functionally works with the team. And still it's a little clunky, So I think we're just looking forward to that Lego piece that like people can just come and build on. It's like, I think that it is the boring stuff about creativity, but it's so necessary.
Right.
And I just think that like there's going to be a brave new world where somebody can start a career and like literally have these rails to like ride their roller coaster on as soon as they come out the gate, which I think is going to be amazing, but it's almost there. It's I think Assemble is just like it's on a great path, and so like we have a lot of love for Frame.io, which I know Assemble is going to be a bit of a competitor with, but can't say enough good things about Frame.io, as far as process goes. And but yeah, I don't know if that helps answer anything, if that's specific in general at the same time.
I think I would add to that too, and just say, just in general, like that's one thing where our growth, as far as growing as filmmakers, I feel like the majority of our growth has been invested into the pre-production process. And I think that's something early on where we would just show up, like when Dan and I were doing everything like 15 years ago, we would just show up and be like, just hustle, sweat our asses off, and just try to make shit happen. And now, as we're trying to make more like sophisticated films, we realize that everything is pre-production. We put so much time and you know, all of these docs and everything. It's like, it's so important, especially if you're working with a bigger team. If your team grows and, you know, you have 30 people, you need to be able to communicate everything really clearly. Right. And that vision that you're trying to bring to life needs to rain down through every step of the process. And that's like from the initial phone call with a client all the way through to the very last, you know, approval of the final master file. It's like, it's all process. I mean, that's why I said we could talk about it for like 3 days, because it's literally like your project is only as strong as your process that you have in place. And that's just, I feel like that's kind of fact nowadays. It's like, because otherwise you can make things happen, but you're going to kill yourself doing it. There's no longevity in just like winking it on a large scale, you know?
Right. Totally. Well, and I think it's hard at a certain point too, even just to like sell getting lucky, you know, it's clients at a certain point to do big, excellent things need to see a process and to know that you are being intentional about things. I would be curious. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say from a client perspective too, it's insanely important, because our goal, like we're so on it when it comes to process that we literally want to provide peace of mind for any client. Like we want to be like a breath of fresh air. Like clients in the agency world, they're already stressed out enough. They have a million things they got to deal with. The last thing they need is to hire a production company that's just like, oh, fuck, is this going to happen? You know, like that's why we have so many processes, right even down to like the way we email and the way we communicate on phone calls and everything. It's like, it's all process driven, because what we want to provide is like when the client communicates with us and interacts with us, there's just like, it's like a moment of zen. Like they don't have to, like we literally just like, we're a stress-free moment in their day. And that's like the ultimate goal. If we can do that throughout the entire process, then we are going to, you know, hopefully not only create an awesome product, but create a badass relationship that's just going to last, you know, year after year. So. Right.
And create a lot of, you know, confidence, which I think is financially valuable to clients as well, you know, which is a big thing. I'm curious. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
We're called Gnarly Bay. So right out the gate, I think they think we're going to be nonchalant. So if we over deliver with processes, they're going to be like, oh, okay, those surfer hippie dudes actually know what they're doing, you know, and they feel like they can invest, because these are big investments for people. So we want to make sure they feel like, you know, it's a good process. The team, if they hear this, will probably roll their eyes because I say this so much, but Kanye has the line, "Everything I'm not makes me everything I am." And that's like the way we like to approach it from the beginning, is we have all these check boxes that we work through with the client that creates a scope of work that basically considers everything, but then checks the boxes for who's responsible for all the different things, you know? So, because I think it's important to at least consider, do you need an animal wrangler? Do you need a prop assistant? Do you need, like, if the box isn't checked, it's saying very early on that isn't a part of the process, you know? So at least presenting that early in the process is like a good way to communicate with everybody involved, you know?
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So for you guys, like, are you doing mostly agency work at this point?
I don't know what the breakdown is. I think it's like, what do you think, 50-50?
It's almost
it slides,
50-50.
You know?
Okay. Well, because I guess what I was wondering is, because I was going to ask, like, there's a lot of logistical process, and I'm always curious about people's creative processes. But I feel like that can shift, you know, obviously it's very different if you're in an agency situation where there's sort of very baked in creative or not, or when there's a client that has like a big idea or a totally open world. And so, like, how do you thrive in one of those situations more? How do you deal with that as far as ideation? Do you prefer people to already have really strong ideas and we're just executing? Like, what are your thoughts on creative process?
It's funny because as I think about it more, it does feel like we're doing more direct to client right now, sort of, or direct to internal agencies, or so it's really like all over the place as far as like how far along creative is. but we do it all, I guess, so we have to kind of shape shift with any different client, and kind of when it comes time for us to have a more input on creativity, that we have a process in place for that and dates set for that, and, pitch decks and pitch materials and all this sort of stuff that can make our investment of time worthwhile, because that's like one of the conundrums, the creativity conundrum of like not being able to bill for creative ideas, I would imagine a lot of people struggle with that, like of somebody comes to you, the phone rings, they say, hey, can you come up with some sort of a concept for this? And then you have to kind of whip a concept out of thin air with the hope that, and the like confidence that you can not waste your time by spending a week or two on the concept and then pitching them and winning the business. So, I think that's like, do you deal with that a lot? Do you direct to like where you have to come up with the concept, or you work more, or do you work more with agencies where they're hiring you specifically as a DP?
I mean, I've done some of both. I've done a lot more DP stuff by volume at this point, which is, even more so I think than being a production company, is pretty plug and play. But COVID really kicked me back into direct to client work a lot, because all the travel DP stuff just evaporated. And that's where it was sort of an interesting thing. And it's something I guess I've been trying to challenge a little bit, because I've seen some people do it really well, but I'm not dogmatic about it. But I guess I've been feeling this thing that's like, if you're in a position where you've positioned yourself well and a client really likes your work and they need ideas, I don't think it's unreasonable to require some sort of like commitment or engagement before you get all into that. And a big thing I read, which it's not rocket science, but this guy Blair Enns has a book called The Win Without Pitching Manifesto that's really, really good. But he sort of gets into this whole thing of basically how to break out of that cycle of like being forced to pitch against people and the overhead that comes with it and everything else. And I think to me, one of the most interesting things about that is that like the idea is so often the most valuable part, right? Like the idea is what so much of this hinges on, and the like getting people to show up and, having gear and people there on the day is it's not easy, but it's not rocket science, but it's like a good idea really makes or breaks a difference. And so I think there is like a shift that needs to happen on our side of the industry almost to be like, no, this is valuable. We don't give away the most valuable part in the hope that you give us the like labor money for free, And so I know there's different perspectives on that. And I don't know, I've been interested to talk to other people, but I find that the clients who really want to work with me on stuff are usually willing to like make that commitment. And that the people who just want to bid you out against like 5 other people and get a bunch of pitches really just want free ideas, And it's like, when I'm on the client side, I don't want to do that to people. Like, I don't want to be like, hey, give us your ideas. And then I don't know. It's a weird thing. And I think especially in the agency world, it's sort of just like come to be expected as normal, but I don't think it's necessary, if that makes sense. Like, I think you could fight to not do it that way.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think from our perspective, whatever way it happens, whether an agency is bringing us an idea or we're required to come up with the concept on our side. Once it's prior to the project getting greenlit is a little bit wishy-washy, like that's where it's that finding that balance of how much time you're going to invest into trying to win the work. But once it's greenlit,
right.
Our process is pretty much the same for either path. And it's just once the project's greenlit, everything gets dropped into a really detailed schedule, and those responsibilities are mapped out in our scope of work for who's responsible for what. And the creative ideation part is a big part of that. And a lot of times we are responsible for that. And we put a lot of time into, mapping out our story structure. What is the 3-act structure that we're going for? And basically from that very first step, we're already starting to think of what our post guys are going to receive on the back end. And how are we, what are we putting together that's going to help communicate with them once they get the footage? So weeks before anybody steps on set, we're trying to map out what's the backbone of this film, what's the story structure, who are characters, who are the special characters, how do these characters kind of rise and fall throughout the storyline, and what's the vibe going to be, what's the music, what's the pacing. Everything is really, we put a lot of time into kind of thinking through those creative steps up front, so that when we do step on set, it's like we're super prepared and ready to rock and roll.
Right.
Even when it comes to trying to find something special, like we're always, you could get a 3-act structure, but it's like, is there anything special that we can kind of layer on top? And it's like we're always pushing ourselves to try to find like unique metaphors or subtle messaging that we can kind of sprinkle throughout, or whether, I don't know. So it's definitely part of the process, and it's usually mapped out. And there's milestones, and it's all mapped out in the calendar, and
Yeah.
it falls on Dan's shoulders, and so Dan does a lot of our script writing, and he usually miraculously whips out some amazing script, which is kind of cool. So we're lucky to have him.
One of the things, at least important to mention, is sometimes like even before it gets greenlit, like sometimes, that pitching process of and I'd love to read that book, because that sounds wonderful to win things without pitching, because I feel like there were years there where we were kind of miraculously when we had good agency connections, agencies would just trust us and be like, hey, we got this new project, and it was easier. But when you go direct to client, it is a lot more pitching, and we've found success and, I wouldn't say failure, but like a little bit of head scratching with making animatics really early in the process, because I think from the very beginning, we've never been like great at like design or like designing pitch decks or this, that, and the other thing. Like we always, like even back to high school or college, it was like when it was public speaking time, I was just like, well, I know how to make a video. So if I don't if I can make a video, I don't have to stand up in front of this class for 10 minutes and talk.
Right.
A video was always the best way to get to our ideas out there and make somebody feel something as quick as possible. And so we've always been a proponent of like making animatics to win business, putting some music, putting some images, using our archive of footage, to kind of like sprinkle into a little edit that's like, that can be shown. A lot of times we do a Squarespace site, so we have like a pretty formulaic, like, couple blocks of text, whether it be approach and, synopsis and approach and like techniques and, these kind of blocks of text that we do. But a lot of times we hope that it pays off with like a little bit of an animatic that somebody can just press play, sit back and be like, oh, those guys either totally get it or they're at least excited and, motivated to make this video and they want this business kind of thing. So that's been
I think we lost Evan.
No, you're good. My camera died.
Oh.
That's eventually going to happen with our cameras here.
I know.
Oh shit, yeah.
That's it for this episode. This is a good reminder that you should always check the battery level on your camera before you go into doing an extended podcast recording. If this podcast was helpful, please give it a like, leave us a rating and review, share it with a friend. We're really trying to build the audience, and we have some really cool guests lined up. I'm not one for teasing, but you may have seen on my Instagram stories recently that Greg Fraser has agreed to come back on the podcast at some point soon. We're just working out scheduling, but it helps us get big guests when we have people who listen to the show. So if you like the show, tell a friend, send a link, put it on Instagram, do whatever you're going to do. Go raise awareness, because it helps us bring this kind of content to you. If you want to check out the guys at Gnarly Bay's work, you can check out their Vimeo, their Instagrams. We'll have that all linked in the description. And if you want to learn more about our sponsors, you can visit assemble.tv or the Core Group website, which will be linked below. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next week.